Alright guys, welcome back to another in-depth deck profile, this time featuring the Gold Pride Punk archetype. This archetype is based on dropping your life points by any amount, which then allows you to access the powerful but underutilized Gold Pride engine. So getting right to it, our primary starter is Zeomin. He can pay 600 life to search any other Punk monster from deck to hand. That is his primary use, and all of our starters are trying to put Zeomin on the field because he can just grab us whatever next part of our Punk combo we need in a given time. And the combo itself is very, very flexible and able to just kind of work around what you have in hand as long as Zeomin is grabbing you your next piece. In total, we actually play effectively 11 copies of Zeomin. Ogre Dance discards itself from hand to grab a Punk monster, that's normally Zeomin. Foxy Tune discards itself in one other card to special summon a Punk monster from deck, that's often Zeomin. And Emergency Teleport can just special summon any level 3 or lower Psychic from deck to field, often gonna be Zeomin. Though Emergency Teleport is probably the single best card in the entire deck because it is so flexible at getting you any part of the Punk engine that you need. It can also just grab you a Ghost Ogre on the opponent's turn so that you get an extra disruption. It's also not even once per turn. Incredible card. The rest of the Punk engine is here just to facilitate plays. Shirakusai allows us to go into our Fusion monster we'll talk about in a moment. Fear Note allows us to go into our Synchro monster that we'll talk about in a moment. Wagon's here to grab the field spell. The field spell allows you to banish a Punk card from your graveyard to special summon a Punk monster from hand. And also, whenever you pay life points to activate the effect of a Psychic monster, which all of our Punks are, you can draw a card. You can do this effect twice per turn, making this an archetypal Pot of Greed with upside. Extreme Session is a disgusting card. We do also play a Madam Spider in this build of the deck. Madam Spider's effect, like any other Punk card, is to pay 600 life to just grab a trap from the deck to hand. She is kind of take it or leave it in a lot of builds just because it's 2 bricks almost, but she gets you an extra disruption and she is also often the second draw off of Extreme Session, so if you don't play her you will see yourself getting the full Pot of Greed benefit less often. As for the trap itself, it just targets and negates effects, and if you have a Punk card on the field, you gain life equal to the targeted monster's attack, which is just, an extra impermanence with some life gain on it. The Gold Pride monsters all share an effect that allows them to be special summoned from hand as long as you have less life than your opponents. This means that it is imperative in this deck to drop your life points by any amount. The Punk cards are really good at doing that, but we also do play a couple of other things just to make sure we always have less life than the opponents do. Leon, for his part, is a level 3 tuner, which is super useful because he can quick effect Synchro Summon on the opponent's turn using Gold Pride cards you control, and also when he is normal or special summon, you can special summon any Gold Pride monster from your graveyard to the field. Just be aware that when you do that effect, it locks you into Gold Pride extra deck monsters for the rest of the turn, so you want this to be towards the very tail end of your combo. We play 2 of Gold Pride Captain Carry. Her primary effect is that when normal or special summoned, she searches a Gold Pride trap from deck to hand. We do not actually play the trap just because it requires we have more Gold Pride cards in the deck to actually function, but she is here mostly because we get her for free off of the Gold Pride Extra Deck starter, and she is a level 3 non-tuner which allows for some Synchro and Xyz plays in this deck. We play 1 Gold Pride Nitro Head. We play a fairly small Gold Pride package in general because they're all searchable off of the spell, and the spell is searchable off an extra deck monster we can consistently go into off the Punk engine. We play 1 Nitro Head because as a level 8, he's not super useful for synchro plays, though there are some things you can do. He can sort of be used for 1 Xyz play, but on his own he actually is a very interesting boss monster. You see, during the opponent's standby phase, you can special summon a Nitro token to the opponent's field. The token is a level 8 with 0 attack, 0 defense, fire, pyro type creature that cannot be used as link material. Linking it away is how you would normally get rid of any donated problem cards that the opponent may give you. You can't do that this time around. So the token is only useful to the opponent pretty much as synchro material, but if you ever see a tuner come down, you can just blow it up. Because what Nitro Head's second ability is that you can, during the opponent's main phase, quick effect destroy the token and destroy any card in any adjacent space to where the token was. That means that if you can take up one of the extra monster zones and then put the token right next to the other unused extra monster zone, the opponent has to use that zone for any link summoning they intend to do, and then as soon as they try to do that, they're in range to be blown up by the Nitro Head token. It also turns off any Kashtira they might be trying to special summon from hand, it turns off Lightning Storm, it makes evenly matched twice as bad. Generally, the token is a piece of disruption that most people are not prepared to play around. It's a very neat little guy. Speaking of incredibly difficult to deal with removal effects, Rollerballer is our archetypal fusion spell. During the main phase, he can quick effect fusion into the only Gold Pride fusion monster, and we'll talk about that when we get to the extra deck. Just be aware that it is a doozy. He is also a level 5 non-tuner, which is very, very useful for going into level 8 synchros in this deck. Our only Gold Pride spell is Gold Pride Better Luck Next Time. This is our Rhoda. When it's activated, you can search a Gold Pride monster, put it in hand, and lose life equal to its attack, which allows you to immediately summon whatever you searched, even if you don't have access to the P.U.N.K engine. It also makes it so that if any of your Gold Pride extra deck monsters put themselves back in the extra deck, as all of them do during the end phase, you can draw a card. That is a part of it we'll cover when we get there, but all of their extra deck monsters are kind of this super form for the base monsters, and then at the end of the turn they're considered powered down and the extra deck monsters return themselves, but then you get to special summon back the base monster to use them again. We also play a small 4-card Speedroid package. The whole point is that Terratop gets you a 3 on board, searches you another 3, neither of them require your normal summon for the turn, which allows you to go into Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, which protects you from hand traps. This deck is particularly vulnerable to Nibiru if you don't open the Terratop. That's one of the main reasons that I keep it in here, is just it's a free Bamboozling Gossip Shadow. We have the room on our end boards, we don't mind going into it. We also play 3 Chicken Games. Chicken Game is well known as a consistency boosting card. The whole point is that you play it, you draw a card, it's replaced itself, it's gotten out of your hand. It basically acts as 3 less copies of cards in the deck so that you see everything else more often. But in this deck in particular, it's very important that it costs you 1,000 life when you use it, because that means that this opens access to your Gold Pride engine. Just another way to get there in case you don't see the P.U.N.K cards. We also play 14 non-engine pieces. You don't necessarily have to play this exact configuration, and in fact I definitely recommend you don't play whatever is important in your meta. Don't play Lanceas if you're playing on Master Duel, for example. It's not going to do much right now against Feedsmith, in which case you want to be playing the Bestial package instead, which is particularly useful. But I do want to mention that all of the Ghost Girls are level 3 tuners that you can normal summon. That comes up very, very often in this deck, because level 3 tuners get you into synchro plays. It's the same stat line as any of your P.U.N.K tuners, so they can replace a P.U.N.K tuner in any situation that you would be using the P.U.N.K tuner. They're really, really good. You can also search Ghost Ogre off of P.U.N.K Jam Dragon Drive out of the extra deck, and you can summon it to the field off of the Emergency Teleport, which allows you to use its effect. Just these guys are really good in this deck. So, on the extra deck, I already mentioned that the Gold Pride cards flip themselves out at the end of the turn, which is why they all come out on the opponent's turn, more or less, outside of the XZs. So Pinballer is our first one. You have to fusion into it with Rollerballer and any other Gold Pride monster, but when you do, it's one of the single strongest removal types in the entire game, and you get 2 of them. You can non-targeting equip face-up monsters your opponent controls to the Pinballer, 2 of them, because you are always going to be fusion summoning this with 2 Gold Pride monsters. Technically you can do more, it's normally overkill and kind of waste the material if you do that. But if your life points are lower than your opponent's, this is non-negatable. So non-targeting, non-negatable 2 removals at once is gross. Rising Carp is our only P.U.N.K fusion monster, and its whole purpose is to fix your board. You fusion into this off of Shirakusai and any other P.U.N.K monster from field or hand, and then this can tribute itself to special summon any 2 non-level 8 P.U.N.K monsters from deck or hand to the field. So what you do is use Shirakusai and whatever else you have. It's normally going to be Zayaman at this point. Grab the Rising Carp, tribute Rising Carp, go into Wagon to fetch the field spell, and Deer Note, which lets you use these 2 for the synchro play, and just go. Go, go, go. Gossip Shadow's here, like I mentioned, just to go into off of Terror Top. The whole idea is that Gossip Shadow can once per turn detach 2 materials to turn an activated monster effect into both players draw a card. This is what's called a pseudo-negate, where technically it stops the effect they were trying to do and replaces it with a different effect. We don't mind drawing a card, and we definitely don't mind giving our opponent a card if it stops their Nibiru in the middle of our combo. Chariot Carry is our Gold Pride starter. We go into this off of 2 level 3s, and it can detach a material to search a Gold Pride spell, which is always better luck next time. Then if your life points are lower than the opponent's, you can send a Gold Pride monster from deck to the graveyard to reborn it with Leon. End of turn, it's always going to flip itself back into the extra deck and then get you a carry from deck or graveyard. We play Dingirsu in here as a protection card that we can go into. The whole idea is that he needs 2 level 8s. We end with a level 8 through the P.U.N.K combo, and it's not too difficult to get an extra one. Slap them together into Dingirsu, and then all of a sudden our board is very difficult to break, because what Dingirsu does for this deck is anytime 1 or more of your cards, not monsters, any of your cards, would be destroyed, you can instead just attach a material off of Dingirsu. This is not once per turn, so you can do it twice normally. We play Malong here as a kind of a level fixer. So Malong is a level 6 synchro that when special summon you can turn it into level 5 or level 7. That gives us access to extra level 8 plays, and it also gives us access, it's the only way in the entire deck that we can access level 10 synchro plays. Also, when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target and return to hand a face-up card the opponent controls. That's sometimes relevant, but going second, it can be useful, and it is, again, the only way that we get into our 1 level 10 we'll talk about in a moment. Desert Locust sees quite a bit more play, I would say, than Malong, because Desert Locust, when quick synced into on the opponent's turn, forces the opponent to discard a card, which is, it's alright, like, you don't hate making them go -1 for free, especially because it can also then quick sync. So we go into this off of Leon and Carry on board, which makes the level 6, goes into Desert Locust, and then Desert Locust can sync with either a Roller Baller or another 3 that we happen to have. Sometimes we end up with 3 carries and we go into a 9, something like that. It's just a stepping stone that gives you bonus benefit along the way to bigger, better plays. Star Leon is Leon's ultimate form. It's kind of underwhelming a lot of the time, but it is a level 6 disruption that we can quick sync into. His effect is that during the main phase you can target and destroy an opponent's monster, and then this card gains attack until end of turn equal to the monster's attack. So it kind of just becomes this big threat that stops the opponent from going too crazy during the battle phase, and it also just destroys something. Sometimes you have to quick sync into like an immediate answer, and that's what Star Leon's here for. We play Enigmaster Packbit because his effect to discard a card and put an opponent's monster in their spell and trap zone is really useful done at instant speed. We do this at instant speed by going into him on our turn as a level 8 synchro. Sometimes we have the materials to go into an extra level 8 synchro. And then we make Dingirsu with him, which means that when they would try to destroy something, we detach a material from Dingirsu. We can detach Packbit which allows us to discard and remove one of their cards as well as get the protection effect. It's just like a neat little interaction we can do. Punk Jam Dragon Drive is our level 8 Punk Synchro. This card is incredibly important to the overall strategy because when it is Synchro summoned, you can pay 600 life, which gets you a free card draw off of our field spell, and then grab a level 3 Psychic monster from deck, add it to hand. This is most often going to be Madam Spider, which we can then special summon with the field spell, get an extra draw, grab our trap, all that good stuff. But you can also, if you have all materials you need in hand already, you can just grab a Ghost Ogre and it's an extra disruption. Cool. Once its effect has actually been used, we don't really need the card anymore, which is why we normally then turn it into Dingirsu using another level 8. As for level 9s, we play a Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Both of our level 9s come from one source, and that is having both carries on the field with a Star Leon on the opponent's turn. This is a super easy board state to engineer, so these guys are actually very easily accessible at quick speed, which is very, very scary for either of them. Trishula, when Synchro Summoned, can banish a card from your opponent's hand, field, and graveyard. This is non-targeting, and the card in the hand is random. But still, like banishing 3, their most important graveyard thing, their most important field thing, and a random card from hand, that can often just end the game. But sometimes we don't want Trishula, sometimes we want a Floodgate, and that's what Shenshen's here for. Shenshen makes it so any card sent from field to graveyard gets banished instead. We do not care about that, because by the time Shenshen hits the field, it's the opponent's turn and everything we're going to put in the graveyard is already there. But this can be absolutely crippling for a significant number of decks. Our one level 10 is Shengying, and Shengying gets huge and makes all of the opponent's stuff smaller, and if you try to destroy him, he banishes a card from your graveyard and field instead. We only go into Shengying off of Malong. That's the only way we actually can in this entire deck, but he's a really difficult to remove disruptive boss monster that just gets huge, makes their stuff small. He's a pretty good guy. We don't use him super often, but when we do, he definitely pulls his weight. As for 11s, we have Psychic End Punisher, and our peppy boy here is a wicked boss monster. So, outside of his baseline 3500 attack, if your life points are less than the opponent's, this card is unaffected by all of the opponent's activated effects, making him a super useful tower that is pretty huge from the get-go. But he has another effect that makes it so if you go to battle phase on either your turn or your opponent's turn, he permanently gains attack equal to the difference between your and your opponent's life total. That means that if you hit one battle phase and the difference is 4,500, which is conveniently the exact amount we tend to hit doing our primary combo, then he becomes an 8,000 attacker and will just one-shot the opponent. He also has a not quick effect once per turn effect to banish a card you and your opponent controls. Less super useful, but sometimes you gotta clear the way for the OTK. And as far as our last extra deck monster, we have Ukiyo-e Punk Amazing Dragon. Amazing Dragon is a level 11 that when synchro summoned, you can bounce cards from the opponent's field to hand equal to the number of level 3 psychics you control or in your graveyard. That's normally anywhere between 3 and 5 in this deck. 5 is our absolute maximum. You're going to use at least 3 doing a Punk combo, normally 4. So it's just basically bounce the entire opponent's board, and we can quick sync into it off of Shirakusai if we happen to end on a board with him, or we can do it with Leon and any level 8, say Nitro Head. Amazing Dragon is also able to just once per turn, not a quick effect, reborn a Punk monster from graveyard to field to help you just close out the game on turn 3. So that's going to be it for our deck profile. Again, as always, sideboard is irrelevant. Fix that up to your local metagame. These are just options that I tend to put in here for both the side deck as well as the non-engine in the actual deck itself. I think this is a pretty solid non-engine in the main deck, but the sideboard is always so meta-dependent. So now we're going to go ahead into combos. See you in a second. Alright guys, so for the combo section of this deck, I actually do not want to do just one card combos because the entire line is very flexible and fluid based on what you open. There are a decent number of soft garnets in this deck, and I feel it's important to understand what to do with them, how to play around that and everything. So rather than focus on a one card combo, I'm actually just going to open a completely random hand, and I am going to combo with it, I'm going to play it out, and I am going to explain my lines of thinking as I do so, just to kind of show you guys how to approach comboing with the deck. So, with that said, let's get started. So this hand works just fine. Very first thing, so Chicken Game cannot be negated really because people cannot activate effects in response to it. So what that means is that we pretty much always activate Chicken Game first thing. So, Chicken Game, draw a card. We drew an Ash, no big deal there. But then E-Telly is our one true starter here. Go into Zeaman, activate Zeaman. Interestingly enough, we have Deer Note. But I think we still just do Foxy Tune, probably. So we're going to go ahead and activate Foxy Tune. Currently, I'm only playing one Deer Note. We do not want to discard the Deer Note because you cannot get it back from the graveyard with the Rising Carp. So instead, I'm going to toss, I guess, Imperm at this point, and then we can grab Shirakusai. Activate Shirakusai, go into Rising Carp. Activate Rising Carp, tribute itself to fix into Wagon and the Deer Note from hand. Activate Wagon to go get Extreme Session, activate Extreme Session, go and get us a Punk Jam Dragon Drive. Couple of triggers, Deer Note's going to bring back, so, interesting. Since we have Leon in hand, you know, that doesn't actually change a whole lot. So we're going to grab Shirakusai here. And then we're going to grab Madam Spider so that we can get our trap. We also get to draw an extra card off of Extreme Session here. Okay, I don't know if Ogre Dance is going to do much for us at this point, but we don't mind it. Oh, actually, because we started with Emergency Teleport, we haven't used our normal summon, which means we can actually do a little bit of a weirdo line. So, I'm going to just normal summon Madam Spider, grab Dangerous Gabu, draw an extra card off Extreme Session, and then activate Extreme Session, banishing Foxy Tune to summon the Ogre Dance. This lets us go into an 8, which is going to be our Dingirsu. We don't get the extra removal off of it because we didn't get the synchro into Packbit, but that's okay, it's still a lot of protection. And then we can go into Chariot Carry. Activate Chariot Carry, detaching Shirakusai to go grab Better Luck next time. And then we can, yes, we do want to send, what do we send? So we've got the Leon, we can search one and send one. We're going to get one carry anyways. So I'm going to send carry. That will give us the 3 carries, and then I will activate Better Luck next time, and we'll grab Nitro Head. So then we can special summon Nitro Head through its own effect, special summon Leon through his own effect, activate Leon to grab the carry back, set the Dangerous Gabu, and what's this guy? Oh, right. Go to end phase, where our Chariot Carry flips out into regular carry, and then we'll draw an extra card off of it. So we draw Chicken Game, doesn't do much, but this gives us Nitro Head's effect to put a token down. We've got Dingirsu protection. We can go into either, well, we go into Desert Locust first, and then either Trishula or Shen Shen, kind of based on what we see the opponent doing, which one we think is going to matter more. Oh, and then of course we have Ash in hand still anyways. So that's just kind of generally how I combo with the deck. Cool, that makes sense? Cool. Alright, so we're back with closing thoughts on our Punk Pride deck. So I love Punk as an archetype, and I've tried to shove it into a whole bunch of different shells. Namely, I love the artwork. I just love the theming, the fact that it kind of uses everything. It's a pretty vanilla one, but it has this unique aspect of like paying your life and trying to get that back somehow and managing it and things like that. You gotta love an archetypal pot of greed. Simultaneously with Gold Pride. Gold Pride is a very evocative theme, like the idea of like the wacky racers, like Redline style of combat racing where everyone's like trying to pull ahead from behind and everyone's got these superpowers. I think that's like a really cool way to do boss monsters. And alongside that, the Gold Pride engine is pretty immune to a lot of disruptions because each of their monsters effectively becomes a boss monster with very little extra work, and they all special summon themselves out. There's no grand combos you're really doing. So like you can play through a Max C, you can play through a Mulch Army, and it's not a huge deal to actually get a disruption or two out on the board with Gold Pride, and I think that's really cool. The downside is that it takes a lot of cards from your hand, but Punk draws you a ton of cards, so it's still not the biggest problem in the world that you're using extra cards on Gold Pride because they don't really generate a whole lot of card advantage in and of themselves. Terror Top is really important. I almost would debate cutting some cards down just to go to 40 with the chicken games still in there, just to increase the likelihood of us opening Terror Top and not losing immediately to a Droll or a Nibiru. But by doing that, you start to lose like starters out of Punk. There's so many one-ofs already. The Gold Pride engine's about as slim as it could get. You could maybe cut Nitro Head, but I like Nitro Head. But I don't know. Overall, I find that this deck, I have taken, not this exact build, but variations to locals, and I've done surprisingly well. I feel like Gold Pride just in general is kind of slept on when it is this archetype that I guess I kind of compare it to Vanquish Soul. It puts boss monsters out that aren't necessarily the single strongest in the world, but they're easy to get out and they are plentiful and they don't require a whole lot of work. It's very mid-range in that regard. The extra deck, like a lot of synchro decks, is incredibly malleable. You could play another 10 instead of Shengying. Baron would be better, but she is banned in the TCG. If you're playing this in Master Duel, I would play Baron in this slot. Instead of Pack-Bit, you could, in theory, I guess, play like a Stardust Dragon or another good level 8, and it would work just fine. You don't necessarily need the Leon. You could, instead of Dingirsu, you could be playing like Hope Harbinger if you wanted to. There's so much flexibility to this particular deck, and to most synchro-based decks, and I find that very, very fun just to tinker with. Lastly, I do want to note that there is a significant package of Punk support coming out at some point in the future. It's actually out in the OCG. Let's look at them just for a moment. So Rising Scale acts as a really strong extender. It's a level 8, so helps you with level 8 plays and everything like that, and it summons something else when it summons itself. So like just 2 free special summons coming off of Rising Scale. Jam Fever is a monster negate in theme. You can theoretically, in certain cases, get to it before you could be Nibiru'd, which helps quite a bit. But it also just like draws you a card. Both of these cards will make this deck significantly better. I've already played around with them a bit, and it does increase the lines quite a bit. So there is some future-proofing to Punk into this kind of deck. The bad news is that it is a little bit bricky. Like people take out the Madam Spider Dangerous Gabu to reduce the amount of bricks, and most of the time, if you get a brick, it's a soft brick. You can still normally play around it, but sometimes you get multiples of them and it makes the hand unplayable. Though there are some interesting combinations you may not think about that you'll run into. For example, Wagon or Madam Spider. and a carry or a Leon, like neither of those do much on their own, but just paying to search with one of these guys then puts you low enough life to special summon the carry or the Leon, and then from there you can Xyz into Chariot Carry and just get like more stuff on the board. So your garnets are not the hardest garnets, but you can draw too many of them in one hand and it just can be rough. The deck is also, at least at the moment, pretty vulnerable to a lot of hand traps. That's one of the reasons that Terror Top is so good, getting us Gossip Shadow early to stop things like Droll and Lockbird. We are not the biggest fan of Dimension Shifter, though I've actually played through it a decent bit with this deck, but we do not want to be doing that. And so yeah, sometimes the deck is really resilient, sometimes you get a hand that just does very little, if not nothing, and you cry. But most of the time I would say the deck is pretty solid. You're not gonna win a YCS because one of your games eventually in the very last round you're gonna open Takatom Borg and Wagon and 3 hand traps and you're gonna cry. But that will be it for this video, guys. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.